Jai Hind to everyone, and welcome to this very, very interesting session, which I'm sure is going to be interesting because I've heard Vishnu on a few platforms, and we were all a part of a wonderful training program that, in fact, he's curated along with his team, and I've heard him in that. And he's so amazing. So I'm really looking forward to this great session on enhancing the quality of online learning. Before I introduce our esteemed guest, I'd like to say a very, very warm thank you to Vishnu, because I know that he's kind of hopping from one webinar to the other these days, really in demand speaking. But it was so nice of him to agree on one phone call that can you please speak, and he agreed. So I'm really thankful and obliged, Vishnu. Just to let you know a little bit about Vishnu, Vishnu Karthik is currently the CEO of Experiential Learning Systems and Director of the Heritage Group of Schools, a group of K-12 experiential learning schools. Apart from being on the board of the Heritage Schools, he is also responsible for the new school initiatives and strategic projects for the group, including curriculum development, instructional leadership, continuous school improvement, technology integration, and leadership development. In his prior roles, he has been the head of the senior school, grade 9 economics teacher, and a trekking instructor. So he wears quite a few hats. A proponent of experiential learning, he has visited over 50 experiential and deeper learning schools worldwide. Among his other administrative responsibilities, he is keenly interested in building instructional leadership capabilities, cognitive neuroscience, education technology, college readiness and placements, student leadership development, adolescent coaching, authentic assessments, and deeper learning curriculum. In his past life, he was a management consultant and has worked with organizations like Accenture, Right Management in the areas of leadership development, organization change management, learning design, and has delivered projects in India, USA, Southeast Asia, and Europe. In 2009, he co-authored Seeking, a travelogue on a 14-day sojourn across the Arabian Sea on a cargo ship. Amazing. His articles on education, K-12 schools, and cognitive neuroscience have appeared in leading newspapers. An alumnus of Harvard University, he also serves as an advisor and faculty to education NGOs, including I Am a Teacher, Institute for Teacher Development. He is a practitioner of yoga and Vedanta, and he believes that his work is a medium to reach his deeper self. He is also a proud father of a beautiful daughter who has Down syndrome. And I think that is what makes him so sensitive and empathetic. Thank you so much, Vishnu, for being a part of our learning journey. It's actually what we call a Shiksha Ka Daur, because we know that it's absolutely new. So this is a Shiksha Ka Naya Daur. Thank you for being a part of teaching us where we can better ourselves. So before I move on, I have my chairman with me and my director.
A very warm welcome to Vishnuji and to Shiksha Ka Daur. Can you hear me? Hello.
Yes, sir, we can. We can go.
Okay. All right. A very warm welcome to Vishnuji, and Bharti ma'am has just abandoned her Zoom separation and her computer.
No, I didn't do that. My Wi-Fi is not working.
Yeah. So
I'm forced to be with him.
Yes. So yeah. Technology has its fun times too. And right from the days of iDiscover, I've been watching over and listening with great intent at Heritage, the educational journey of Heritage, of Manit as well. And it is such a pleasure to have Vishnu with us today. And I'm so happy to note his various the distances which he has covered from Harvard to the Arabian Sea, and from there to Vedanta. And during these times of COVID Gurukul, we are having every day about 3 or 4 kinds of the same topic is being done, but I'm sure with Vishnu there will be a fresh perspective, a fresh lookout into what kind of a thing we are watching at. And this is definitely path breaking This is going to be a path-breaking learning experience for all of you. Uh, COVID-19, we have a response to you. And every time I think about Vishnu's talk on the Fiki Arise platform the other day, it was basically, I borrowed a few things from that also. It was about how a child's brain develops 90%. I'm sure that he's going to tell us more about it today. So a very, very warm welcome to Vishnu Karthik. So good to have you with us in the box. And you were there with us a couple of years ago, and we took you
Last year
around
only.
to, yeah, a couple of months. It seems like BC seems like before Corona seems like something very far away.
That's
And we
right.
had all gone together to Sun City. Over to you, ma'am.
A very warm welcome, Vishnu. And it's so nice to for you to have us on Sunbeam platform, because I think I don't have missed any session of yours, and it's always a pleasure listening to you. I'm sure today also will be benefited. And yes, what you have been talking, we are taking a lot of note, and there has been a new learning during this time, and which I'm loving it personally, because there is it's the best use of lockdown, or we are all forced to stay at home. But me and my team, let me assure you, we have not wasted even a single day. We have been
Yes.
working and we are trying to learn new things, and that's so fulfilling. So thank you once again, Vishnu, for sparing your time for all of us.
And a warm welcome, Mansky.
Thank you so much to both of y'all. Over to you, Vishnu. The stage is all yours.
Thank you so much. A quick thumbs up if you can hear me well and see me well.
Yes. Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Deepak ji and Bharti ji, for this wonderful opportunity. I must say to the audience at large that a couple of years back, Deepak ji and Bharti ji had hosted me at your schools and had some time to visit one of your couple of your campuses, in fact. And I was very impressed about the kind of work you are doing. You know, schools like Heritage are in some sense privileged. We have better fees, better budgets, so it is fairly easy what we are doing. But what Sunbeam has been able to do across its 25 campuses, it's nothing short of a miracle. You know, I work around the country and in some parts of the US and UK. There is very few school chains have done the kind of work you've done at that price point. Much of India lives in the areas where your schools function, and you do a great nation building service. And I'm really appreciative of the work you've been doing. The visit to Deepak ji, you should, I don't know if I had a chance to share this with you. That visit was personally, was a very important visit, because I had come in when my wife was in the family way. And it's just a month before my daughter Meera was born. And we had the sankalpa that we have to visit Varanasi before Meera was born. And I think exactly 30 days after my visit to your place, Meera was born post that. And life has been beautiful since then. In fact, recently, about 6 months back, I had a chance to travel. I don't know if Harsh is there in this call, but we had a chance to visit some good schools along with Harsh in the UK. And I had got to know more about your work. I'm really honored to be a part of this platform. And Amritaji, once again, thank you for having me here. Also, thank you for the very generous introductions. I know those are introductions, of course. I'll be more than looking forward to learning with you on this journey. Like I had said, many of things what we have done is done when there are big budgets, etc. The real magic is when you do it, and I'll get a chance to learn from that in it. So I'm going to share a few slides just to make this conversation more structured. But I'll hang out post the session for any question and answer. You could also drop in your question in the chat box, because the real juice of this session will be in the questions you will be asking us. So we're really looking forward to those questions, and hopefully seeing you in person once this COVID gets over. So I'm going to share my slide. Just allow me a couple of seconds for me to share my screen. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah. So once again, thank you and welcome to this opportunity. The next 20 minutes or so, I'm just going to talk a bit about what did our experience been to enhance the quality of learning in an online format. We've been running this for the last 4 months, and we've got some success, some failures, but I'm just going to share what worked, what didn't work, and be looking forward to hearing from you as to what worked for you as well. But before I do that, I really want to congratulate all the teachers out there in this platform. 4 months back, we never expected COVID. We were busy with our lesson plans, getting ready to close the academic session and start a new academic session. And COVID hit. And like Bhartiji just shared, we just got on to working and figuring out what will work for our students in these times of constraint and unpredictability. No, frankly, nobody was prepared anywhere in the world of how do we continue our children learn. But looking back now in 4 months' time, I think the teaching community in this country have really risen up to the task. Uh, I'm not saying this not just because I'm a part of this fraternity, but even objectively look at it. I think after the medical team, after the paramedics, after the police and the defense forces, I think the teachers of this country have really risen up and done a great service to ensure that our children continue to learn with very minimal support in that sense. We just learned on the go and we made it possible. So a huge round of applause to all the teachers out there in this platform. And you need to recognize that in spite of what people tell you, in spite of whether the external world recognizes us or not, you should know what you have done here is nothing short of magic, and we have to continue doing this till the time schools reopen. When I just walked into this webinar, there's this beautiful music which is being played. I believe that's a poem by Sri Rabindranath Tagore. I'm from the South. I really don't know much of, but this song I know. And it kind of sums up the journey of a teacher. We all walk alone in this, although we are there together for each other. But there will always be chaos and commotion by parents, by media, by the government, of fee regulation, of 100 other complaints. But we have to walk alone to ensure that our children learn. So congratulations and all the best. There is still many more months of work to be done on this. Amritaji, in her introduction, had shared that I'm a father also. I'm also, by training, a student of cognitive neuroscience. Cognitive neuroscience is a very new field. Essentially, what it does is it is at the intersection of learning sciences, that is around cognition, and brain sciences, which is around how do brains learn best. So my experience has been to figure out how do you design learning experience to best suit the structure of a brain and the brain functioning in itself. And one of the key messages I often talk to policymakers, parents, and even the media is to recognize that 90% of the brain gets physically developed by age 6. I'm sharing this information for a specific reason, because there is always this question parents ask us across the country. Parents ask us that why do you continue online learning? Why can't you just shut down, give a break for 1 year, and let's come back next year? That's a question I'm sure many of parents would have asked you also. A lot of parents ask us as well. And they used to ask at least 3-4 months back. In fact, there are a lot of parents who think that let me not send the child to school for a year, let me come back later, especially the younger kids in the primary nursery era. And even the government, for example, is regulating. They're trying to say half an hour of teaching time is enough. In some states, they have taken some decisions that they will ban online learning and not have any learning at all. Luckily, the high courts of those state governments have overruled those rulings. But when these policies are passed, they don't realize this truth that the human brain is developed fully by age 6, at least 90%. And the balance 9-10% gets developed physically by puberty, which is around middle school or high school. So what we do for our children every day counts. If children go through long periods of not attending some learning, then the brain does go through some degeneration in it. And I'll share a lot of research around this topic so that you're better equipped to talk to your own colleagues and parents, especially, to help them understand this. In fact, as a nation, we have got our policy priority in reverse. Advanced nations always focus a lot on primary school and pre-primary school a lot, and not so much on college. If you go abroad, college is very expensive. Not everybody does college because college is only for the few who can get through. But the primary and middle schools, they either have high quality public schooling systems or they allow high quality private schooling systems. In our country, it's the other way around, where we focus inordinately on higher education, which is IITs, build IIMs, for example, and make college really super cheap. But they have very poor schooling systems in it. But humans don't develop that way. They first get the foundational right, and college is something which, if people have an option, they move on to do it. So, in our world of cognitive neuroscience, we feel that the age 6 is the golden hour of human development. So, if you don't have children meeting certain milestones on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, they lose a lot of potential in their lifetime later. And that's a scientific truth. So it doesn't matter whether government allows us to run schools. It doesn't matter whether parents want to pay fees or don't want to pay fees. It doesn't matter whether parents believe in online learning and not believe in online learning. The fact of the matter is, a children's brain is growing against a biological clock. And that clock doesn't wait for anybody. It just keeps growing. And if we don't provide educational inputs, the brain starts degenerating. Now, what could be the areas where the brain could start degenerating if you don't provide learning inputs? There are three broad areas which scientists say that they should get enough inputs early on. The first input the brain learns best by age 6 is language and literacy. Language is the capacity to speak, which is a natural gift nature has given us, that any child can learn as many languages as possible, provided they get exposed to it by age 6. Second is literacy. Literacy is reading and writing. That is not natural. It is artificially learned, but it is learned best in early years, example. So language and literacy, when children don't learn early on, they tend to suffer later. The second thing children learn very strongly early on is capacity to make social connections. We are all social animals, as they call, but our success in life later on is not on the scores we get, is not on how much money we have, etc. Of course, those are all variables, but a huge predictor of our own happiness essentially is the number of friends we are able to make, number of relationships we are able to build. In fact, there's enough research. Harvard University did a research called the happiness study, which essentially they tracked children for 60 years, right from they're born till they're 60 years of age. They track those children over 60 years and to identify what makes children or individuals happy later on in life. Of course, we know, like the research predicted also, that it's not academic success, it's not money you make, it's not career which makes them happy. But what actually makes people happy is the number of friends they have. In fact, another interesting research that the same research threw out is even your life longevity. In fact, how long do they live is also not based on how healthy food you eat or whether you exercise every day. Of course, those are also variables. But the biggest variable on your life expectancy itself is the number of friends you have. That is why we also have in our own communities our grandparents, grandmothers living till 80, 90, 100 healthy. Some of them is also because they have healthy relationships. That's a huge predictor. In countries which do not have good social structures, especially the Nordic countries, they might have the best medical systems, but they also have the highest rates of depression and suicides, largely also because of that incapacity to make relationships. So that is why making relationships is important, and that capacity for children to make it. And that gets formed before age 6. Another researcher, which I often recommend parents to read, is this Canadian researcher called Jordan Peterson. He's written this very popular book called The 12 Rules of Life. I strongly urge some of you to read the book. If you can't, you can watch the YouTube video, which is a 1-hour video of the entire book. You can finish that in an hour's time. It's called Jordan Peterson, 12 Rules of Life. An entire chapter he dedicates to parenting. That is more in meditation of his journey as a parent to his daughter. And he says the number one gift you can give as educators and parents to children is actually the capacity to make friends and work in a team. Because we don't get that, they either become bullies or dadas, or they become victims of bullies. But if you help them to form healthy relationships, they also have better academic success, better career success. That's the second thing which you get formed by age 6. So the reason I'm sharing this is that you'll have to tell your parents and educate them that making children sit at home is not an option. you have to provide some learning continuity for our children. And a child's brain really doesn't wait for long. Uh, so that's one piece of research I want you to know about brain research. There's another piece also I want to talk about why learning continuity is important. Why is it important for children to learn even during breaks? This is a question often at my own home. My wife asked me. That's my daughter, Mira. She goes to my preschool, and every day she sits before the online screen and does some activity for 45 minutes to an hour with my teacher. My mother, my family members ask me, "Hey Vishnu, is it screen time good? Can't I just wait for 6 months to get back in it?" So another piece of research which I want as educators to know this is the research by Brookings Institute. Brookings Institute is a very credible institute in the US. They are a global organization, and they do research on several things, largely around family well-being, competitiveness of nations, etc. And one of the research they did also is, interestingly, how much do children lose learning during summer vacations? Of course, this was done before COVID. So in the US, unlike in India, summer vacations are very long. Some of you might know they have a vacation of up to 9 weeks to 12 weeks. Can you imagine? 3 months to 4 months is the average summer vacation in many districts, if not all, in many districts in the US. Reason being, 100 years back, much of these children in American school used to do farming also. They used to help their families in harvest. And harvest season is around July, August. Unlike in India, where it happens a little earlier because we are more tropical than the West. So they all used to give chutti and they used to help parents do harvest. But nobody bothered over the 100 years that to change the summer vacation cycle, because most children have stopped doing farming now. Still, they have about 9 weeks of vacation. Now, Brookings Institute did an interesting study of what happens to children when they take vacation for 9 weeks and come back to school. It turns out that we as educators always knew this, but researchers have turned out that when children take 9 weeks to 12 weeks of not attending school, they have significant learning losses. Okay. Especially around literacy and numeracy. Numeracy is mathematics. And the broad thumb rule is, for every 8 weeks of children not attending school, there is 4 weeks of learning loss. Okay. Now, the sad part is, this 4 weeks of learning loss, when they have on the first day of the school, after they come back after summer vacation, it doesn't get bridged. That 4 weeks becomes 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 11, it gets bigger and bigger. Of course, for some kids, if they're sharper and some teachers are doing remediation, you do holiday homework and all that, it gets bridged. But for most kids, that 4 weeks become bigger and bigger. Remember, in education, we know that as educators, any learning gap is very difficult to bridge. The gap gets bigger and bigger and bigger. We call it the compounding impact on learning. You know, compound interest in investments, you put 100 rupees, it becomes 110, 120, it compounds. Now, the rate of change increases in compounding. Compounding is a magical phenomenon. Similarly, it happens in learning gaps. If the gap is this much after a vacation, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And it gets so big that by grade 9, 10, you realize that this kid can't do academics well. He can't do math. He can't do this subject. They make some serious choices in it. Now, this research is for 9 weeks in summer vacation. Imagine what happens in COVID, which the vacation is much longer now, right? Brookings now says that in countries which do not offer any online learning, which do not offer open school in some blended format, children can lose up to 1 year. In fact, I'll send these research articles to Amrita ji and she can distribute to your team. And I want you to read these articles so that you're better equipped to talk to your parents. Parents are very ignorant of these things. 1 year is a learning loss. Brookings is predicting for well-developed American Western nations. You could imagine what's going to happen to our children. In it, the impact of what we are doing and not doing during COVID will be realized 15 years from now when these children go to colleges or for workforces. So that's one thing. So children will lose reading and writing. By the way, mathematics is a huge problem. When children don't do math for a long time, it drops even more than language, because at least language you keep talking at home, you keep watching something, there is some support in language. Math, if it's not managed well, children lose it. The problem with math is more psychological. It's not just skill at the early age. It's psychological to the extent that many children don't do math, not because they're not good at math, but because they're just not comfortable with math. It's a psychological thing. It's an emotional thing with math. They just have this fear, so hence they're not able to do it. Not because they're not good at math. There is a fear which gets developed in math if it is not supported well. So that's one reason why I always tell my wife, please ensure if it's on whatever it is, online or blended, some form of learning should happen. The second important reason for a child's brain why learning continuity is important is rituals and routines. I'll explain what this word means. Uh, a child's brain develops well in an atmosphere of freedom, in an atmosphere of joy, abundance. We all know that. But what we don't know enough is that the children's brain work effectively when the freedom has a boundary, when there is certain predictability the child's brain is able to expect. So that is why in our ancient times, in our own traditions, there is a certain discipline we used to have. We used to get up early in the time. There is even school or no school. Many families used to ensure, even on a weekend, on a holiday, you're supposed to do this, you're supposed to do that. There's a certain rhythm and routine. Why? Psychologically, today neuroscience today tells you that brains which go through a certain discipline every day are far more confident and safer. Confidence is a word. When children's brains see certain predictability and day order, we call it in our world rituals and routines. That at this time I'll get up, this time I have to brush, this time I have to eat, this time I have to sit and read, this time I have to do group work, this time I have to do homework, this time I have to go play. There's a certain predictability in it. Of course, there's also time for leisure. There's also time for relaxation. There's a time to go to bed. Uh, when the brain sees a rhythm, the brain is more confident to learn more things. Children who are in households, children who are in families which are not able to provide these, those children always develop challenges academically, even professionally and personally too. Brain research today tells you that by age 6 or 7, if you don't build these, it gets difficult later to build in. Even more scary, that children who go through families where they're not uh, able to establish the rituals and routines, then when they grow up, they not only have challenges with managing time. You've seen some adults, they're always hurrying. They're ever in a hurry. It's not that they have so many things to do, but they're ever in a hurry, for example. They're not able to estimate time. They think that they can do this in 1 hour's time. When they actually start doing it, it'll be 4 hours. Some of these things, because when they're young, they were not experiencing a ritual. More important, children who don't experience the rituals and routines when they're young, when they grow into adults, they also become very stressed with ambiguity and chaos. So if they're as adults, when children don't experience this, as adults, they can't manage stress. When there's something uncertain, when there's chaos happening in their lives, they start getting stressful, right? All of those things today science tells you is that because of their incapacity to experience rituals and routines. So that's the second reason I say blended learning is important, because in these long shutdowns, at least my daughter knows that I'm supposed to get up at this time. I'm supposed to sit before a screen, talk to my teacher. This is my teacher, is a familiar face. This is the activity I'm supposed to do. So those are the predictability which we give, which is a very important thing for our children's brain. Right? The third reason, in fact, for me, is the most important reason why online learning, blended learning is important, is that when a brain does not meet individuals, friends, family, etc., they go through their cortisol level. It's an hormone in our brain. The cortisol level goes up. The problem with cortisol level going up is cortisol is the hormone which improves stress in our bodies. So whenever you feel stressful, it's because cortisol goes up, right? We all know sources of stress. Source of stress could be too much of overwork or too much of screen, watching television, for example, is a source of stress. Any conflict at home, any financial issue, lack of diet, lack of sleep, those are known sources of stress. The unknown source of stress, we call it silent source of stress, is lack of social connections. So young children don't see familiar faces. They actually cortisol level keeps building up. And anything more than 3 weeks or 4 weeks, when they don't meet friends, it clinically becomes chronic stress. It's a technical term. You search in Google what chronic stress is, you'll get to know more about it. Chronic stress is very dangerous for a children's brain. I'll tell you why. I'll give you a very simple reason why you can visually see why this is harmful. There is an organ called hippocampus. Hippocampus will be the shape of like a seahorse or a horseshoe. And it's in the midbrain. It's right here. Hippocampus' primary role is to record new information and imprint it. For example, whatever you are hearing and seeing in this presentation, it is the hippocampus which converts that sensory information and imprints in your brain into memory. So hippocampus is the most important organ for learning in our brain. Now, unfortunately or fortunately, hippocampus is right next to an organ called amygdala. Amygdala is this much big. It's a size. It's called almond in Greek because it looks is the size of an almond. It looks like an almond. The primary motive of amygdala is to process emotions. So when there is no stress, amygdala allows hippocampus to function very well. So learning happens in a joyous phase. That's why we all know as educators that if a child is happy, learning happens. But moment the amygdala experiences stress, like the way it is happening right now during lockdowns, the child's brain doesn't know what's happening. It stops the hippocampus, it switches off the hippocampus. So when during stress, when cortisol levels are up, hippocampus is switched off biologically. You can't switch it on. Now, when it switched off for 3 weeks or more, it's called chronic stress. The hippocampus starts getting smaller and smaller. It starts thinking that I don't need to have a use in this life. Let me conserve energy of the brain. Let me become smaller and smaller. The hippocampus actually becomes smaller. And hippocampus becomes smaller, it doesn't grow back bigger. So children always have a curtailed or a shortened capacity to learn all through their lives. So children who go through stress younger in life, even as adults, they can't learn effectively. So that's why managing stress in young children is extremely important. There's a very specific reason I'm sharing this to you now, because I'm going to refer to this in a later slide on how you design learning platforms. So managing stress is important. The best way to manage stress in COVID is to help children connect with friends. And that is why online learning is important, because in an online learning, there is some connection with the teacher. You know, teachers, your power of your presence is, you don't understand, because when a child sees you, it's a familiar face the child is seeing. In a lockdown, when the children are not seeing anything, there is a certain restriction of going and playing around, not meeting friends, not going to school. Your physical presence itself is a source of familiarity for the child, especially for very young children. Connecting with friends, for example, it is a wonderful thing for them to have, even if it's over Skype or Zoom or Google. But connecting with friends helps cortisol levels be managed. So these are the broad 3 reasons why you should continue some form of blended learning for our children positively. Another important question I get asked in many of these conferences and workshops by parents is that, hey Vishnu, I recognize that online learning is important. I recognize blended learning important. But isn't screen time bad? Isn't screen time harmful for my eyes, for my children's eyes? Isn't it bad for the health? I've read so much about the ill effects of screen time. We've been trying to restrict children to sit before television and tablets and mobile phones. Now you're telling us to do this on blended. Isn't that harmful? Okay. So I want to share this quote by a very renowned medical scientist and a physician from Switzerland. And he made this on modern technology. And he said this modern world overwhelmed people with data, and this overabundance was both confusing and harmful to the mind. Hence, we must at best avoid this new technology. This is what Conrad had said. But interestingly, he said this in 1565 on the printing press. He did not say this on social media or mobile phones or online screen. He said this in 1565 on the printing press. You know, till the 15th century, 16th century, books were very expensive to make. You know, books was not available. It is only available for the rich, the aristocrats, the men of the church or the clergy or the ruling class. Common man or women didn't have books because it's very expensive to make a book, because there's no printing press. They used to make hardbound leather, and it takes a long while to make a book also. Then in 15th, 16th century, the miracle happened. A technology invention called printing press came, and hence the cost of production of books reduced significantly. And there was this proliferation of books, and information is consumed rapidly by the common folks through books. When that happened, suddenly scientists of those times, like Conrad, were very worried what's going to happen to the human brain, because they couldn't quite comprehend what books could do to human brains, because till then there's no books available. So for about 30-40 years since the time books were popular, people like Conrad actually led a movement to stop publishing of books. In fact, they were very worried what happened to young children. There were paintings in the time of Renaissance, for example, of young children reading books and indicating that they're going to get dementia or they're going to get neurotic because of a lot of information overload and the brain is going to burst. There are a lot of these fears that the brain will just burst out because of reading books. So there's a lot of fears which happened. And Conrad is not alone. Even in the 5th century BC, which is about 2000 years before Conrad, the popular philosopher Socrates, you would know Socrates. Socrates is known to have made a comment in one of his popular public forums. Socrates is known to give public lectures in those times. and Greek as a civilization used to have this culture of sitting around experts and listening to pravachans in some sense. And in one of his lectures, Socrates said, writing will lead to memory loss. And hence he stopped everybody from writing. Of course, today we know it is not true at all, because Socrates at that time was also worried about the new invention at that point in time, which is the writing communication. Because till the 5th, 6th century BC, writing was not common. It is only popular in a few literary works, but for governance and for ordering government dictats, etc., it's only in the 5th, 6th century in the Greek civilization. Of course, we started writing in the Indian civilization a little earlier, but in Greeks, they started about 5th century. And Socrates was feeling that anybody who writes will lose memory. So the point I'm trying to make is, whenever a new technology comes, a natural reaction of the society is to question the technology, is to express fear on that new technology. And this time is no different in it. So now we know, in fact, I've been sharing this for the last 3-4 years. Nobody bothered, but suddenly people are interested now in knowing this research. But 4-5 years back, I used to share this thing about good screen time versus bad screen time. I said, look, screen time is not bad per se. Just the way science is not bad. There's nothing called good. There's nothing called science is bad or good. It depends on how you use science. Similarly, screen time is also, there's nothing called a bad screen time. You just have to differentiate between good screen time and bad screen time. Dr. Michael Reach is popularly known as the mediatrician. He's a pediatrician by profession, and he works at one of the world's leading hospitals, Boston Children's Hospital. And he often says that screen time is an obsolete concept when screen time is all around us. It is the content we consume and the context in which we consume that affects our well-being. And that's something that's for us to keep in mind. So the quality of screen time depends on how you use it. And I'll talk about a bit more on the next slide on why. So there are several research organizations who have published a lot, and I'm going to give you access to these in it. In fact, if you had attended one of our online learning programs on certificate program teaching learning, all these are shared in that too in it. Now, the World Health Organization, which is the leading health organization, had given some very specific screen guidelines some time back. By the way, none of this research which I'm sharing is a research during COVID. It's not that the research came because of COVID happened. These research have been done 4-5 years back, and it's been there. Of course, only now we are getting interested in these things. Yeah. WHO says that screen time is good for kids if there's a human being on the other end. It's very important to remember. So if there is a human being, a live human being, like the way we have right now, I see live human beings on the other side and you see me on this side, and we see each other interact, then this screen time is good screen time. This is not going to harm us in it. In fact, WHO also in the same report says that for very young children, as young as 18 months infants, okay, it is okay for them to have at least 40 minutes of screen time, provided there's a live human being. If there's a recorded video, it is not beneficial at all to young infants. But if there's a human being doing something called, as in brain science, we call it serve and return. Like we serve something so that the child can see me speaking, and the child returns with an answer. And I serve and I return. Come to think of it, that's the fundamental building block for a brain to learn, serve and return. And it happens very well over a screen time by a live human being on the other side. So if there's a live human being, screen time is good. Also, the fear against screen time is not because screen time is going to do something bad on us. It is just the addictive nature of screen time which is bad. So watching a video is not bad. Watching a Netflix channel is not bad. What is bad is when a child sits and watches a Netflix channel for 4 hours or plays a video game for 3 hours. Those are dangerous, because in 3 hours of watching or playing a video game or 4 hours of watching a television, you could be playing outside or reading a book or talking to your parent or friends. You're not doing some other things and you get obsessed with playing a video game. That is harmful for our brain. The American Academy of Pediatricians, a leading health organization on children's health and pediatric health, had released 2 video reports, and this is very interesting for you to know this. They released a report in 1998 when the primary form of screens is televisions. 1998 is a pre-internet era. There's not much tablets or mobile phones back then. But that time, screen means television, and television is passive consumption. So the AAP released its first report for televisions, and that time they were very anti-screen time because television is very addictive by nature. But then in 2016, which is post-internet, by the time tablets had come, smartphones had come, and a lot of people had access to devices, uh, the AAP revised its guidelines and said, look, our old report in 1998 is misleading. In fact, a lot of the fear in today's world on screen time came from the 1998 report. You should know this. This 1998 report is the one which led to a lot of fear on screen time. It led to a lot of people questioning what screen time is going to do to us. But people don't realize that fear came on a world of televisions, not in the world of smartphones, not in the world of iPads and tablets. Now, AAP revised its guidelines in the post-internet era, in 2016, and it says any media consumption for learning and connection is healthy and good. So you should tell this to your parents, that this kind of media consumption is healthy and good. AAP also warns that any media for passive consumption of a shooting is bad. Like quietly sitting and watching a lecture or watching a YouTube channel or a cartoon show, that's passive consumption. There's no active consumption. That is harmful. Or any media consumption for soothing. Many parents do that, right? When a child is crying or refusing to eat, your answer to that is give a tablet or mobile phone so that the child can quietly see it. That is very dangerous and harmful for our children. That is for soothing. That's for learning purposes. AAP also says that any fast-paced, violent, and distractible content, that's very harmful. That can't happen either. Because I recently wrote an article for the Hindu newspaper on the ills of video games, because anything which is fast-paced or violent, where you start shooting people, killing people, damaging public property, it sends a wrong kind of social messaging. Or even distractible content. Some games are such way that there are too many moving bright colors. Those are very harmful for your brains. But anything which is deliberate, intimate, purposefully slow, like any of the blended learnings could be, those are very healthy for our children. Another question often I'm asked is, okay, now that I'm convinced that blended learning is okay, but how much of blended learning is okay every day? So I'm shared a report on this slide, the UNICEF report, a report on growing up in a connected world, and UNICEF had clearly given broad guidelines on number of hours a child could have every day. And what UNICEF recommends is that for young children in the primary school, an hour and a half to 2 hours is absolutely okay to have screen time, provided there are gaps in between, there is a break, and that screen time is also an active conversation rather than a passive lecture. For middle school, which is grades 3 upwards to grade 8 or grade 7, up to 2 to 3.5 hours is okay. And for senior school, which is grade 8 upwards, 3 to 4.5 hours is okay, plus some offline work, asynchronous work, individual work, etc. So that's the broad guidelines which this one is shared. By the way, I'm also going to share a couple of resources. So this is a book called The Brain Rules. A lot of the research which I have shared is from this book called Brain Rules by John Medina. It's not expensive. You can find this on Amazon in it. Another book I strongly recommend is this book. This is a Bible on your child's growing mind. One of my ex-professors, Jane M. Healy, had written this book. It's a great book on young children, especially around routines, language, how do you build these, and some of these principles you can use in online setting also. There is no difference right now in it. Okay, so now that I've shared some research from the world of cognitive neuroscience and also of learning, I'm now going to go into some simple tips of how we can make our online learning very effective. We use a 3R approach. Traditionally, some of you know as educators, 3 R's mean reading, writing, and arithmetic, right? Some of them say in India, there are 4 R's: reading, writing, arithmetic, and Ramayana. There are 4 R's in which most children grow up in India, which is fairly true in most parts of the country. At the heritage schools, we look at 3 R's in a very different way. We call it, in fact, we have borrowed it from William Dackett, another child education psychologist. He says the 3 R's, which is very important for our children, is relationships, relevance, and rigor. He says for any good learning to happen in any good school, you first need to have the relationships of a safe, accepting relationship between the teacher and the taught, the teacher and the student. Then there should be relevance, which means that the child should know, why am I learning, what am I learning? And that is extremely important. Children will learn anything as long as they know why am I learning this. Many times we just learn things in chemistry or math without even knowing why like I was very good in math. I had no clue why did I learn those things, right? Third is rigor. Of course, rigor is about doing well, excelling, etc. So these are the 3 R's: relationship, relevance, and rigor. Often schools go the opposite way. They first focus on rigor, then relevance, then relationships. At the heritage schools, we often recommend that do it in the other way around. The first is relationship, second is relevance, the third is rigor. And now, in an online world, this is even more important. In fact, this is more relevant in an online world than in a physical world. So even if you're not able to do this in a physical context, when you're designing online learning, keep these 3 R's. Your first thing is relationship, then comes relevant, then is rigor. So first is about relationship. So I often tell educators that when you are designing your blended school online classes, the primary objective of teaching is to exhibit care. It is not to teach the content. It is because it's impossible for you to teach the content on an online class in some of the subjects, right? It's impossible to do the exact thing what you've done in a physical world. The first primary thing is to exhibit care to your children. So which means that spending a lot of time is speaking to children, connecting one-on-one, etc., having group discussions, facilitating circle times, etc., letting children speak some of their fears, their joys, their experiences, etc. Those are some of the things which will help make your online learning very effective. Okay. The second is relevance itself. Relevance is how do you ensure that what you're teaching is relevant to the child's life. One of the big mistakes most educators do is that when they plan their lessons for a virtual class, they try to exactly replicate a physical class. That is not going to happen, because in a physical class you can do several things which you can't do in a virtual class, and vice versa. So my suggestion is don't try to replicate except for grade 12 possibly or grade 10 possibly, which are examination years. Other years you should not even try to replicate it. What you should do is just focus on the core. Core is, if you have 10 chapters, like I used to teach economics in CBSE, used to have about 5 chapters in grade 9, grade 10. I don't recall exactly now, it's been 3-4 years now. But if I have to relook at it now, I will not teach the 5 chapters. I will probably teach only 3 chapters, but I'll do that so well. And the rest 2 chapters, I'll just give it as notes or PowerPoint or whatever it is. Let them learn on their own. Right? I'll probably just spend 1 hour and just finish off the syllabus in it. But I will at least go deeper into those 3 chapters. So that's extremely important for us to remember, that don't try to cover the entire syllabus. Focus only on the core, but do that core well in it. And I'm sure, that is also another research which people have done across curriculum boards. Every curriculum has a core. If you're teaching science, chemistry or math, out of the 10 units to cover, there are 7 is the most important. It doesn't get covered later. Some units gets covered later. Like atomic structure is a classic example in science. It gets covered 3 times. Why would you want to repeat this again and again? If you miss it now, don't worry. The child is going to learn it in grade 9 or grade 10 in it. So you have to identify what are the curriculum topics going to get repeated. If it's getting repeated, drop it. You don't have to do it. Focus what is not getting repeated, but do that well. Do that longer. Second is right assessments. As educators, we have to ensure that during online, you cannot do only test-based assessments. You have to do more independent assessment of different types. You also have to allow students to choose their choice of topics, because children don't have smartphones or an internet connection the way everybody would have. Some kids don't have these things. So you'll have to have abundant empathy for children who don't have technology at their home, but yet provide opportunities for them to exhibit their level of understanding. So which means that in assessments, you can give choices to children to either do a PowerPoint or an essay or a speech, or multiple ways. So give multiple ways to express their understanding. Second, do little of test this year. Don't do too much test. If let's say you're doing a written test 5 times this year, probably just do it 2 times this year or 3 times this year, and the rest to just make it more open-ended. Have a lot of open-ended assessments. They are as effective as closed-ended assessments. Open-ended assessments mean, by the way, that's another topic in itself, but I'm just giving you a quick this one. There are certain kinds of assessments which is very hard to copy. There are no one right answer, and will make the child think hard. Okay, these kind of assessments are more easier to give online, because it's very difficult to copy in a Google. So you can give a very open-ended question, say, okay, find an answer to this. It could be related to any, and by the way, you can always come up with such questions in your topic, and it's not difficult. You just need to think harder to do it. and and if it's difficult to copy, children won't copy. They may do research, but they'll still do it on their own in it. So relevance is the second thing. Third is rigor, which is around planning your lesson. Today, one of the important Twitter feeds I was seeing from education researcher called Doug Lemore. Doug Lemore is a world-renowned teacher trainer. In fact, he's published this book called Teach Like a Champion. Some of you might know this book. It's a very popular book. In fact, we've been trained at Heritage on this model, and now we do these trainings where he's given pockets of simple protocols, what works in a classroom, what doesn't work in a classroom. And he's probably observed 1 million classes and 1 million teachers, and he's given feedback. He's one of the world-renowned experts on teacher observing. And one thing he said this today in one of the Twitter interactions is that he said, if teachers don't plan their lesson for an online class and they go, then you're consuming a working memory towards running the class and not engaging the children. What it essentially, I'm just going to paraphrase this. What essentially means is that if our planning is not right for an online class, it's true of physical also, but more so an online class, the planning is not right, then when the class is happening, I would only be thinking of running the class well and not looking at the children. For example, as I'm speaking, I am looking at all of you. I am figuring out whether the engagement levels are there or not. My obsession is not about running the class because I know what's going to come in the next slide. My obsession is right now just seeing whether all of you are engaged or not. So planning is extremely critical in online learning. What would planning mean? Which means that you not only prepare your lesson, you also prepare a lesson which is feasible. And third, you have to run a demo for yourself. It essentially means checking the technology is going to work, not going to work. Technology will not work when you start. We all know this. When we want technology to work, it won't work. And every class, there will always be a challenge, some challenge or the other. So you'll have to ensure that those are planned at your end. The second thing you have to do, which is the most in our heritage, why our online classes are relatively going well. And today in my school, parents don't want to come to a school. They're happy with an online school. Is also because of the second point, which is rhythms and routines. We have established certain rhythms and routines so that the online class run well. A simple good example is that when the session started, that you had a music playing in the beginning. I was coming at a lot of stress and pressure. I had 2 webinars. I was just running a little late. I was trying to prepare my notes. But when I came into your webinar and I heard the music play, I just automatically my mind was ready. I automatically became quiet and I was automatically getting centered. It is a powerful ritual to begin the class with, right? My suggestion is you should start every class like this. There should be a 2-minute music. We always do this in our this one. For example, we know when we start, we'll do some centering, we'll do some breathing exercise or some music we listen to so that everybody is just quieter. And then we know that this is the rules of protocols of what we have to maintain in a class. There are norms established with children that you're supposed to do these things and not do these things, when to keep the video on, when to keep the video off, muting the sound system, for example. All of these are clearly established in it. And you have to establish those in it. I see a lot of online classes are not effective because they don't establish the routines or the protocols in it. My sense is you would have done that as any good teaching this one would do. Okay. So my last submission to teachers is that, this is uncharted waters for all of us. We've not done this in the past. We might not do this in the future also. Maybe this is just about another 6 months we're going to do this. So hence, these times, we have to try out and experiment what works and what doesn't work well. And I know a lot of you will take a lot of stress trying to make things work. My suggestion to educators, fellow educators, is give yourself permission to make mistakes, right? You will not be able to get everything right the first time. Not every of your plan on the lesson in a virtual class will work well. You will fail. Kids will get disengaged. Parents will get upset. But keep trying. Don't make the same mistake again. But give yourself permission to make mistakes, knowing very well it will take time, but you'll surely get better at it in it. My request, I'm sure that your leadership does this, is that leaders also now, like any parent comes and complains about any of my teachers, I give that benefit of doubt to the teacher, and I'm sure that happens in your schooling system that we give permission to each other to make mistakes going forward. Okay. For those of you who are on Twitter, this is my Twitter handle. I keep posting a lot of online articles there. Another reason why I share this is that if you are an educator, I strongly recommend you are on Twitter, because it's a great resource for free resources for you on articles, resources, web links, lesson plans, all comes on Twitter. You just need to be connected with the top 100, 200 Twitter feeds, and you keep getting these resources every day free of cost. So my suggestion to you is to be on Twitter, and if you are, you're welcome to join. You can take a picture of this one, and your QR code will take you to my page. My last message to the team here is that at heritage schools, for us, COVID is a once in a lifetime opportunity, because we've always been wanting to do reform and make education more meaningful. But making reform in a running school when the school is physically present is very difficult. But when a school is shut because of COVID, it provided a lot of opportunity to do the reform what we wanted, especially around personalized learning, which is to help children to have a personalized learning path, which is now possible because of technology, especially around self-directed and exploratory, which is to allow children to do independent research, which is not possible in a physical class, but is possible in a technology platform. And also especially to do small group and one-on-one work. In a physical class, it's not easy to do small group work. It's very difficult to have, the teacher should be extremely well trained to do it. But in an online setting, it's extremely easy. In a Zoom setting, in a click of a button, you can get into small groups and work and get back. You're also able to do a lot of one-on-one work in it. In a physical class, I normally observe about 6 or 7 classes a week. Since COVID, I probably attend about 40, 50 classes a week, observing classes and giving feedback to teachers. That's the difference online provides to you. So it is a great opportunity if you think of it. So as educators, I think this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, and we should embrace it and implement as much reform as possible in our classrooms. With this, I'm ending my session. Thank you very much, and I'll hang over for any questions you might have. Thank you so much, and over to you, Amrita.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Vishnu. I think that was great learning for all of us. So what we're going to do now is there are 1 or 2 questions that we have collated. I request Aditya sir to ask the 1 or 2 questions that we have got from people, and then we'll throw it open to the larger audience to ask questions. And when you have to ask questions, please raise your hands on the participants bar. So over to you, Aditya sir.
Yeah, thank you so much, Vishnu, for such an enriching session. In fact, I must thank you on behalf of the teacher fraternity for holding the fort so strongly in your last week's teacher dialogue on the Twitter, where obviously you stood forth for the way the teachers and the schools are working, and that is an amazing thing. So you spoke about right assessment. I want to know from you, you have also spoken about authentic assessment. Are the two things same, or is there a distinct difference between both?
Great question. Yes, there is a distinct difference, although there are overlaps. When I say right assessment, I say what I mean is this the assessment suited for that task? An assessment is always for a task or for a content. Right means whether this is suited to measure what is supposed to measure in it. An authentic assessment for me is it the authentic voice of the child? Some assessments by nature will bring in a certain sense of individuality about a child. For example, writing a novel by a child. You can have long-term 3-month projects where children have to write a novel about Corona experience or long-term. You can figure out it. But the output is very authentic to that child. And fundamentally, when children have a voice in any assessment, that assessment becomes very genuine. The children gets very interested. So that's the difference between right means is it suiting the topic or concept or task I'm measuring, but authentic means is it true to the child's individuality when they express that. Like a poster making is an authentic assessment, for example, in my mind, because there is a certain uniqueness that the child is going to bring in to that.
And that is probably where Heritage's My Passion project comes from. So would you like to talk a little bit about this wonderful concept? Because I've been following and have been pretty intrigued by it.
Oh, very good question in it. So My passion, we've been running My Passion project for quite some time now. And all good schools around the world, by the way, will have some versions of it. We also copied it from other, good schooling systems. Sir, at times of COVID, like I said, it's very difficult for you to do regular assessments, right? But you have to do some assessment, because without assessment, children don't have a relevance to learn something, right? So by nature, what we do, so what we did was that let's get children interested in some topic, right? All children are interested in different things. Let them get interested in some topic. Let them work on the topic for a long time. So assessment can also be short term and long term. You can also do a assessment for 2-3 hours, or you can also ask the children to work on something for 3 months, and then you publish it, and then you give a feedback on it. So in this case, what happens? Children have to identify a topic of their liking, where they're interested in. Some children are like about pets. It could be about gardening. It could be about climate. It could be about physics, math, etc. But there are certain rules about that project. One rule is it should be connected to the topic you're discussing. It can't be something wild about Pata Lok and Netflix. No, Pata Lok and Netflix makes sense if somebody is working a project on political economics or social science in it. So there should be some subject connection. Second, you have to make a presentation of the topic itself to your classmates and say, okay, this is the topic I'm going to make. This is why I'm going to make, and how am I going to do the project? So the assessment here is not the final outcome, but the way you do the project itself. Okay, the process itself is the assessment. Okay, it's not the final output. Third, you also define certain norms that it should be, there should be a written piece, there should be a product which you make, there should be a presentation you have to make of the written piece, there should be a timeline in which you have to do, etc. And lastly, very important, you make the student product presented before parents. Okay, it's a very popular principle of any experiential learning school or project-based learning school, or even a Steiner school, Waldorf schools, etc. They have it. Student presentation. Reggio Emilia, for example, follows this philosophy that student, when they do any assessment, they have to present that assessment to a larger audience, so that students think that there is an audience for my assessment. Many times when you ask students to do projects, many children think, okay, I'm going to do this project, my teachers want to see it, give a score on 5 on 10 or 9 on 10, and the project goes to the shelf. Nobody sees it. But when you say the children that no, your project will have to be presented to 80 other parents in the class, teachers will be there, and you have to make a presentation and people will give you feedback, then it's like a theater in itself. Students start preparing for that final show of presenting the project itself. So that is the My Passion project, which happens. It happens in every grade. It is linked to the subject. Topic is chosen by the student. Students have to, the assessment is not on the final project, but on the way the project is done. And lastly, student have to present to a real audience about the project itself.
Thank you so much. And one last question that I have of you is about the SAMR model. Now,
Okay.
in the SAMR model, obviously, we have also started walking on that path, but it's very difficult to identify moving from augmentation to modification. Is it all about using edtech tools, or is it also about redefining the way you teach in a synchronous model also? Like you mentioned, the teacher decides upon what is to be taught, leaves the rest. So how do we walk on that path? How do we take ourselves at one notch up from simply replacement to the modification and augmentation?
Okay, so I don't know if everybody has seen the SAMR model. I think some of you might have attended, so you're aware, but some of you may not know SAMR model is. It's a simple framework which we say how does technology adoption happens in education settings. SAMR, of course, S stands for substitution, A is augmentation, M is modification, 4 is redefinition. It's a technical thing, but bottom line is, when you start using technology, you start replacing what you do in physical sense. But by the time you go to the highest level, which is R, with redefinition, you not only replace, but you also use technology for new opportunities in itself. For example, classic example of redefinition is classroom observations itself. Earlier, observation used to happen, in physical sense. Never did we realize that you can actually have virtual observations. and give feedback to teachers. For me, that's the highest level of redefinition in some sense in it. So Aditya, I'm not going to get into the framework. The framework is largely in a course. We want to give a broad outline for us to think the way we think it. But the gist of your question is it just about technology to move up? Is it beyond technology? My answer is, of course, yes. Technology is just one piece of it. Technology is not everything. In fact, there's another topic itself in it. I just finished taking one for my own leadership team on different stages of what works and what doesn't work in technology. So technology, I'm not a big fan of technology at all. Frankly, I should tell you this. I'm a big fan of online learning for sure, but that's not because of technology, but because of the possibilities teachers can do on technology, right? Zoom is great. There's no question around it. But the power of Zoom depends on the teacher, what the teacher wants to do or what she doesn't want to do in it, right? People use Zoom just for boring lectures, but people use Zoom for great workshops, also for small group work, etc. So it depends on the teacher. So technology is one small piece. The question is, do we have right practices? Like a simple circle time, like for example, the music you played, I'm going back to a small ritual which you do it. I don't know why schools don't do it. It's a simple thing. You start the day, you play some music. There is enough neuroscience that tells you that any soothing music quietens the body, quietens the mind. And children, you never see in a class, you can control the setting. At home, you don't control the setting. Nobody knows whether TV is blaring, grandmother is watching some Saas Bahu serial and she's sitting right next door and watch. You don't know, right? So the best simple ritual you can do is play a music, let them quiet and ask them to take 2 deep breaths, close their eyes. 2-minute exercise, but it provides amazing output for you in terms of engagement. Now, that has nothing to do with technology. It's got to do with your practice in your community. So my response to school groups like Sunbeam is that you just need to arrive at 8 or 9 core practices. As a community, you should come together and say, okay, any Sunbeam class will have these 8 or 9 features. And we all commit to do this. And we do training so that everybody is able to do those 8 or 9 features. At least to begin with, at least arrive at those 8 or 9. Then you also have 4 or 5 common things for the teacher leaders. Because there are teacher leaders. So there should be about 8 or 9 for teachers. There should be about 8 or 9 for teacher leaders. At least agree on those. It's got nothing to do with technology. It's just to do with your protocols, your philosophies, your rituals. That has the bigger impact on student learning in it. I'm sorry, it's a long answer to your short question.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
But I want to drive home the fact it is not online. It is what we do with the online.
Right.
And I also...
Sorry. No, Aditya, sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. Actually,
I wanted to, Aditya,
yes,
I just wanted to request Vishnu, can you share some videos or whatever children have done the projects? Because seniors are submitting the projects, but then when it comes to junior section, if you could give a few samples, at least one or two in the junior section, it will really help us.
So I'll do that. I'll send you some video samples of it. Some of the samples have been converted to videos and put it on YouTube. And I think Aditya would have seen one of those, which is floating around in the social media. But I'll send this to Bharti. I'll send it to you. You take a look at it. If you want, I can put you in touch with the head of the middle school or junior school. They can give you specific templates you want. They can pass it on to you. Yeah.
Okay, so Aditya, do you have another question to ask? Because I think Sandeep wants to ask a question. He's posted it.
I just wanted to ask this for my clarity. Why I bought this SAMR model is that the more you work, you tend to realize that it is not always that you have moved from an augmentation to a modification. There will be classes where you have to come into simple substitution and then possibly move forward. So it's not that a teacher moves up directly. He has to be up and down. Am I right on that?
Absolutely. A good question, Aditya. Also, it's a little technical for the audience. I can get on a one-on-one with you to discuss this. You're right that you don't move across your technology initiatives on all 4 immediately. There's some you'll probably move quickly to a redefinition. Some you will probably just stay at substitution in itself. So it depends on what initiative and technology itself you are taking. So there is no one size fit all. You probably want to do it at a pace which is comfortable for the teachers too. Yeah.
In fact, I think in the SAMR model, I was just talking to my teachers, especially initially after I read the SAMR, I realized that obviously the first step for us was from an offline move to an online without any training. So, everybody after seeing the CPVT were a little dejected that, maybe we should. So I said, never mind, you've already done the first step. Actually, you did the substitution. So feel good about yourself and pat yourself on the back. And now let's keep moving on to the augmentation and modification, redefinition. But, very, very good thoughts. I will request Sandeep to please ask his question.
Yeah, hi, Vishnu. Good evening.
Good evening, Sandeep. Tell me. Yes.
I hope I am audible. I must compliment you first. I don't know, there is some magic in your voice, and there is so much of life in your content that I just can't stop listening to you. And I must tell you that this is the third time I'm listening to you.
Very nice of you. Thank you.
I did your course also on XLS.
Wonderful.
And I had a very good session there. I had plenty of questions also there. And it's been a pleasure going through the entire session today. It is so enriching.
Wonderful.
I have a small question. What I feel, and in fact, this is more than a worry than a question. What of late we have been realizing that working on a digital platform make things extremely fast moving and thereby make it even more complex and competitive many a time. So this kind of sense of completion and then again a new target and then again new learning and then, there is a never ending hunger of grabbing and gobbling anything and everything happening all around. So at times you forget that, okay, fine, at 11:30 at night, I sometimes ponder that, okay, fine. So I have learned so many things today and now what do I do? By the time I try to comprehend that, okay, fine, what is going to be useful for me, for what reason and for what context of my profession, the next day comes and then again I go through plenty of sessions. So my question is, there is too much of stress building now happening. Unknowingly also, we all are under too much of stress. And this stress somehow gets reflected on our performance in the professional setup, in the professional life. So how to handle this stress? And when I'm asking this question, I'm asking as a person who is working for a school. Also, it must be happening with a teacher as well, I believe. So that is what is my question.
So Sandeep, thank you for this very pertinent question. I really wish I knew the answer because I'm actually equally stressed and burnt out. I think all of us, people who run schools, this has been an extraordinary time in our lives. I don't think anybody I think we've given a part of our lives. Something has gone in the last 3-4 months has happened. And that's why I started this session with, acknowledging the teacher's effort. It is phenomenal. I don't think the general public is realized. Some do. I'm not, but I don't think people have realized what teachers have done in the last 3-4 months in it. So Sandeep, that's a natural question. It emerges in my own mind, and I frankly don't have answers to it. But I'll tell you what we are doing about it. What personally we are doing. One is, of course, recognize that. Whether we agree whether we're going to learn or not learn, going through the experience itself is a good outcome. Like we are in the middle of a professional development right now, and a lot of our teachers are also overwhelmed. There is planning to do, parent workshops to do, and there are so many trainings to attend, etc. But my sense is that at this point we don't know what are we learning, etc. But it'll come in hand in some time moving forward. Like, for example, a lot of the things which you're learning today, some of us might think, what is this? But I can assure you, education has changed for good. This blended is here to stay. Not in some sense, not that physical schools are going to shut. No, that's not going to happen for many, many years, or many decades for that matter. But even in physical schools, you will still have a lot of blended formats going forward. So much of the learnings you have done today, these are critical life skills as educators we need to have for the next 10, 20 years. People who have gone through the grind in the now will be a significant competitive advantage later. And teachers, and I see some teachers who have given up. They don't want to invest in all. I tell them that, look, you're going to be really outskilled when everything gets back to normal. you'll really be lower on skills. So don't do that. So be with the flow, continue with the learning, because this is going to really help you in the next 10 years. If not immediately, the next 10 years, you'll be, I'm sure many of you feel that your own technology skills have gone up 10 times in the last 4 months, which others would have taken 10 years for you to build. But it has happened now. So we should be thankful that this happened. Second, Sandeep, I think the job of education leaders now, remember I talked about relationships in the 3 hours. I think that's very valid for education leaders like ourselves too. It is our job to ensure that we have regular relationship building, structures and routines with our own teachers. The teachers are burning out in it. So all it requires is to ensure, let's say, for example, it is an expectation in my school that every week I have to speak to at least 5 teachers one-on-one. Just a call, for example, just a one face-to-face. And that's the way my principals, for example, there is at least a list made that by end of the month, everybody gets spoken to once, one-on-one, because there are also pay cuts happening. There are uncertainty about salaries, jobs, 100 things are happening. So how do we keep them together and keep them, we're all in this together? So the best way is to keep talking to people. For me, a best form of stress busting for teachers at least is connections, having informal networks, get-togethers virtually, having connections. Today's Saturday, Friday evening, we actually have our Bollywood night every month, and their entire heritage teachers get together. I mean, it was weird to begin with, but this is the 4th or the 5th edition we're doing it. Everybody's in it. So at least we have this community feeling in it. So another way to build is just community feeling around it. I don't have answered your question, Sandeep, but I don't have answers, but at least some things which will help us to. Lastly, Sandeep, by the way, this is something I'm beginning to tell
Thank
to
you so much.
teachers in it. Forget about the question what Sandeep asked. Forget about COVID, not COVID, etc. But otherwise also, I think as teachers, we are anyways in a extreme profession. We stand so many hours a day, we stretch, there is corrections to do, there is Saturdays working. It's not an easy life for us. Now, the best way for us to protect our own sanity, our own stress level, you should have daily discipline of yoga, daily discipline of meditation, daily discipline of deep breathing, daily discipline of exercise. That's the only way you will have to manage your, nobody's going to take care of us. Of course, there are teams will take care of it, but our own personal health and well-being is in our hands. So I strongly recommend every day of yoga, meditation, physical exercise at least, so that you are ready for the next day.
So I think we're kind of running out of time. There can be numerous questions, but I will take the liberty of asking 2 quick questions because I've heard Manit speaking about it a little. So I want you to kind of just elaborate on what Heritage is doing. One, relationship building with parents. How are you working on that? And the other, of course, there are many things about screen time, good time, and I think we're all pretty clear about what research says.
Yes.
What are the practical ways, though, you are telling your children or your teachers are telling your children to save themselves from stress in any case? Like, for example, we are doing exercises in eye yoga. And of course, we are talking to them on insisting on blue filters. So these are 2 things that we are doing. We're doing eye yoga every day with, with breaks in the classes. Can you just share with us what are you doing on both these fronts?
Okay, so on the first question about relationship with parents, Amritaji, I'll try to answer that question. Actually, that is a primary thing. Also, because of to ensure, communicate what value are we providing, to ensure that they're part of the community, they pay fees on time so that the institution runs. Because these are also times they need parent support a lot. Parents are also going through stress, struggles. Some of them may have financial issues. To reach out support to them, it's a 2-way street which we're doing. So primarily what we have done when the school shut down is that, one, at the class level, every parent is spoken to. The expectation with every class teacher is that in a fortnight, in 2-week cycle, every parent has been spoken to at least once on a phone. It could be a 10-minute call. Every 15 days that happens. So, and we have a rooster, we track that. Any parent is sharing discomfort, stress, financial issue, that gets tracked and mapped. Parent also. And parents really are appreciative when they get a call every 15 days from the teacher one-on-one on it. Second, we do something called samvads. Samvads is a Sanskrit word for dialogues. In fact, we just finished one in the morning. We've been doing about 28, 30 of those. These are grade-wise samvads where parents are called, and we do an 90-minute session with them. Now, these samvads are just around talking about what do we aspire for our children, reflecting back on the nature of education, some learnings as parents, etc. This is reflective exercises. It's a bunch of adults get together and having a deeper conversation about what we need to do for our children to get better in it. We don't talk about anything technical, about exams, about fees, nothing. We just talk about what do we want for our children. We do some creative exercises about visualizing for the child some of the fears they've had on their own childhood. A lot of times parents are parents unconsciously. They're not very conscious of the parenting styles. They're not conscious of what they have gone through as as a child in a school. And many times when they don't have a clarity on that, they also make wrong choices for their parents, for their children. They show anger, frustration, etc. So we help them do some deep reflective exercises with their with parents in itself. So that's the deepest form of connection we make with parents, to have conversations about their aspiration for their children and how do we collectively do that. That is a very strong process which we do every year, not just during COVID. During COVID, of course, it's become virtual. Otherwise, we used to do this in a physical setting. It's a day-long exercise which we do. Attendance is compulsory for those. Parents have to be there. We take attendance and we tell parents they don't attend. They have to attend in a couple of weeks' time and things like that. The third thing which we do, of course, is we started doing some coffee sessions also. Now, coffee sessions are not samvads where I don't come or leadership come, but only the head of the school definitely comes for coffee sessions, or the instruction leads come for the coffee sessions, where their operational issues get sorted out, like an online connection not working well, or this teacher is not effective enough, or this teacher is good enough. There are also a lot of positive feedback which comes. Some of those things also we do. And again, that is calendared. Everybody knows that every 15 days, every month, coffee sessions happen with the school head. It's a 1 hour thing. Doesn't take time. Of course, they'd have to put it in the calendar for everybody's, so that nobody misses it out. So before any issue becomes a big issue, it gets sorted out at the coffee session itself. These are some of the things which we do for it. Of course, we do a series of trainings for parents during these times. How do you set up your living room? How do you manage? How do you communicate COVID to your own children and things like that? So ongoing engagement which we do with them.
Okay, thank you so much.
The second part of the question was around
the eye. What do you do for the screen time?
No, we just do an eye yoga also. Again, we recommend a blue film in it. That's something which we share in it. Although beyond which we only designed a structure where they don't see a screen for more than 30 minutes at a stretch.
Right.
You go back to breaks and things like that. Yeah. Right. I'm sure you also do those things.
Yes, sure. Thank you so much. Before I end, I'll request Harsh to say a few words. If Harsh, and you remember you just mentioning that you met him also a few.
Yeah, we had a good time in UK. Yes.
Harsh, over to you.
Hi, Harsh.
Thank you so much, Vishnu, for joining us. And we met about 2 years ago or 3 years ago when he came to Varanasi, and then obviously we were together as part of the FICCI delegation, which went to UK in January just before the lockdown. So I think we caught the last.
We were lucky.
We were lucky that we caught the last of it. And I've been following Heritage. Obviously, Deepak sir has already said that we've been following the wonderful work of Heritage for the last 10, 15 odd years. How Manit and Ashish Rajpal, they had collaborated. And after that, in fact, my son has gone to, I'm not sure if you know, but he attended ACE, which is part of the Autism Center of Excellence, which was part of the Heritage group also. So we are both special parents, and there's the connect which we share. And this, I think today's class, it looked like a class actually. It looked like an experiential learning workshop as opposed to being a webinar. And I think we can take so many threads from this conversation and can have a webinar on every thread. There's so much content which all of us have received. So thank you so much, Vishnu. And let's meet. We'll be obviously connecting in other platforms also, and we're looking forward to the workshop which we are planning with Sunbeam.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me over.
So before I just end, I'll request, of course, Pratima to give the thank you note. I would like to come. I've come to Heritage about 2-3 times. Manit has been kind enough to host me there. I want to come and visit ACE because we also run an autism center, mainly because of Advay, Harsh's son, who's so special to us. And I'd like to come and learn. I'd like to come with my team. So I'm self-inviting myself. I'm not waiting for the invitation.
Even I'm going to self-invite myself to you next time.
Please, over to you, Pratibha, for your thank you note.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Like so many else, Vishnu, today, I also was absolutely mesmerized throughout the entire proceedings of the webinar today. And ditto what everyone else before me has spoken about your intervention with us today. I would, however, like to thank you for one very specific reason. And that is, what I feel is that when technology took over the school scenario, I think a lot of us felt that now we are going to morph into some kind of a robotic persona who is going to be, simulating the human touch, but not being there. Run through it so strongly that it reiterates my belief and dispels any doubt that we will not be able to do justice to the need of the hour as in that faith and that connect today. Thank you so much. We look forward to many more such sessions from you.
Absolutely.
And of course, your visit to Varanasi and Sandeep.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you, folks. Take care. Thanks.
Thank you so much, and an absolute pleasure listening to you, Vishnu.
Same here.
Hope to make it more often. Thank you.
Yes, not at all. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.